when you bend down to pick a heavy object, see, your hands and your legs will bend, but the axis of the body will remain constant. The skull, which is also part of the body's axis, can cause partial movement. Now, even if the skull is partially movable, or the bones that make up the body's axis is partially movable, these bones cannot move outside the body's axis, or it cannot cause movement outside the body's axis, unlike the hands and the legs, which can move outside the body's axis. So this part of the skeleton that forms the body's axis is known as the axial skeleton. Now, the axial skeleton consists of the skull, which is like a helmet that protects the internal, important and delicate organ, the brain, which is the controller of the body. Now, the skull is not only made up of one bone, but it is made up of multiple bones. The skull consists of the cranium, this part that protects the brain, and the facial bones. There are 8 cranial bones and 14 facial bones. Now, the bones in the cranium are rigidly attached to each other by immovable joints. Also, the facial bones are immovable with the exception of the lower jaw. The upper jaw is known as the maxilla and the lower jaw is known as the mandible. Now see, while chewing something, notice the next time your upper jaw or the rest of your face won't move. Only the lower jaw will move, and that facilitates the chewing process. So the skull is the protector of the brain. Now, why does it happen that when a person is hit on the backside of the head, falls unconscious? Does the skull not protect the brain then? Well, yes, it does protect the brain, but there is an opening at the backside of the skull, which is known as the foramen magnum. Foramen means opening, and magnum means large. So it is a large opening present at the backside of the skull, and if a person is hit over here, since the brain remains uncovered, the brain gets affected and the person falls unconscious. This is the region from where the vertebral column or the backbone starts. Now, even when a person is standing erect, his back looks curved. See? Now, this is because the vertebral column or the backbone has a curved nature. If you carefully notice, from neck below, the vertebral column is curved like a S twice. See, this is one S and this is the second S. So the vertebral column is curved in a double S shape. Now the vertebral column is not a single continuous bone, but it is made of multiple small units known as the vertebra. See, this is the top view of the vertebrae and this is the side view. So many such small units or vertebrae together forms the vertebral column. Now let us see the structure of one vertebra. See, this is what a vertebra looks like, and it closely resembles a man stretching an arrow on the bow. See, this part of the vertebra the central part of it is known as the centrum, which means central. This part, which looks like the bow or the arch, is known as the neural arch. This is the portion which allows movement of the neurons, and hence it is known as the neural arch. And this part of the vertebra, which looks like the arrow, or it is a spiny process, is known as the neural spine. Now, the first two vertebra of the vertebral column does not look like the rest of the vertebrae. It lacks the central body or the centrum and the spiny processes known as the neural spine. It has the neural arch, and the first vertebra is known as the Atlas, just like the Greek god Atlas who held the entire earth. Similarly, this vertebra holds the skull. The next vertebra next to the Atlas is known as the axis. It is structurally similar to the Atlas, and it is from here that the body's axis starts. That is why it is known as the axis. Now, there are in total 33 vertebrae in the human vertebral column. Now see, the first 7 vertebra present in the neck region is known as cervical, which means neck. The next 12 is present in our thoracic area, so it is known as the thoracic vertebra. Next, there are 5 vertebra present in our loin region, and hence it is known as the lumbar vertebra, which means the loin. Next comes 5 bones or 5 vertebra that forms the sacrum or the hip region. Now the 5 vertebra fuses together to form only one sacrum. Next comes coccyx. Even here, like the sacrum, 4 vertebra fuses together to form one coccyx. So in total, there are 33 vertebrae present in our human vertebral column. Now see, there are outgrowths of the thoracic vertebra from both the sides, and it forms a cage-like structure. This cage-like structure you can easily make out if you see the body structure of a lean man. This cage-like structure is known as the rib cage, and the rib cage provides protection to the important delicate organs such as the heart and the lungs. Since there are 12 thoracic vertebra and there are outgrowths coming out from either side of the vertebra, so there will be 12 pairs of rib bones. Now these bones posteriorly start from the vertebra or the thoracic vertebra and ends in front and fuses together in this flat bone that is present in the middle of the chest, known as the sternum or the breastbone. Now, the first 7 pairs of the 12 pairs of rib bones are directly attached to the breastbone or the sternum in front. But the next 3 pairs of rib bones, that is the 8th, 9th and the 10th pair of rib bones, is not directly attached to the sternum, but it is indirectly attached. How so? Well, the cartilages of these 3 pairs of bones fuse with each other, and in turn they fuse with the cartilage of the 7th pair of the rib bone. Now finally they go and attach to the sternum. So they are not directly joined to the sternum, but they are indirectly joined. Now finally, the 11th and the 12th pair of rib bones are posteriorly attached to the vertebral column from the thoracic vertebra, but do not come in front to be joined directly or indirectly to the sternum. So in total, there are 12 pairs of rib bones. So let us now try and identify the different parts of the axial skeleton. Yes, first, the axial skeleton consists of the skull, that forms a protective covering that protects the internal brain. Next comes the vertebral column that forms the body's axis, and it has a double S structure, and that is why even when we stand straight, we have a curved back. The vertebral column is not a single continuous process, but it is made up of 33 small bones known as the vertebrae. And finally, there are 12 vertebrae from which there are outwardly processes that forms the protective rib cage, and the rib cage protects the internal heart and the lungs. So all these three together forms the axial skeleton.